I started where I didn't have to be like the center of attention. I didn't have to be the star of the show. So for those who are not starting a podcast yet, just realize that the reason you're probably not starting it yet is because you think you have to have all the answers.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another Friday SEO tip. Today's Thursday, but man, I cannot wait until Friday. I'm Chris Raulf, founder of Boulder SEO Marketing, BSM. Today, I've got Austin Willman with me. Austin is the partnerships manager and podcast host over at Digital Web Solutions. He recently actually interviewed me on their e-Coffee with Experts podcast. And I'll be honest with you, it was one of the better podcast conversations I've had. Kudos to you, Austin. Austin really knows how to run an interview. After we wrapped the recording where I was a guest, we got into a conversation about something I've been saying a lot lately. Podcasts and YouTube videos are now some of the most cited resources in Google AI overviews and across AI search platforms like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, etc. These large language models are feeding on this content. Why? It's net new content created by people like you and me, right? And that changes everything about how we should think about podcasting as a marketing strategy. So I invited Austin to join me today. We're going to talk about why every business should be thinking about podcasting as part of their AI, SEO, and generative engine optimization strategy. And then we're going to get into the practical side of how to actually host great interviews that produce content worth citing. Austin, welcome.
What's up, Chris? Man, it's good to see you again. The tables have turned,
I
and I'm
know.
excited to be on this side.
Awesome. Hey, do you want to very briefly, did I miss anything? Anything else somebody should know about you?
You nailed it, Chris. The only thing that I would add for the business owner audience is that my background is not in marketing. My background is in business development. It's in community management, and it's in, I don't know how else to say this, but like consciousness engineering.
Yeah.
It's in meditation and being present and being in the moment.
Man, I usually do yoga at this time, but I'm
Yeah.
so happy to talk to you
Yeah.
right now. This is my meditation for today. Hey,
Exactly.
let's dive right into it. So before we get into interviewing techniques, I want to set the stage for why this matters right now, right? YouTube, owned by Google, is the number one social source cited by these AI overviews that nearly every search triggers now in Google, right? It's not LinkedIn, not X, not your blog. It is YouTube, right? And podcasts that live on YouTube, such as, you know, if you're watching this, you're probably watching this on YouTube, right? Are a huge part of that. Austin, why do you think AI systems are pulling so heavily from video and podcast content?
Well, if you think about it, Google and LLMs, they're trying to be right, but they're also trying to provide valuable answers to the user, to the person who's prompting them. So what I'm saying is Google doesn't like to be, or LLMs don't like to be wrong, and Google doesn't like to be redundant. So a podcast is a format where you can kind of tackle both of those elements. You can have, I can say the same thing to you, and I can say the same thing to 10 other people on 10 other podcasts, but I won't use the exact same words every time. So in that way, it's unique content. You know, there's a lot of overlapping words, but it's unique content, but at the same time, it is correct content. So the LLMs are listening to this human-based language, and they're able to easily understand it. They're able to look across sources and find a trend and say, okay, this matches what the user is asking about, and therefore I can bring this content in, and it's not easily it's not manipulated. Like, yes, you can have videos that are scripted and cut and edited, but if you're talking about a podcast, like, it's not that manufactured. The conversation is natural. And because it's natural, it builds trust. Not not to say that anything that is spoken word is more trustworthy than something that's written on a blog or a website. That's not what I'm saying, but the format of this allows things to be shared in a different way, but it can also extract the core concept, the core meaning, and deliver it in a way that's easy for LLMs to understand and easy for the user to understand too.
Absolutely. And so I came up with some questions, right? And you actually added some notes here.
Uh-huh.
One of the notes that I saw is you're mentioning entities. Okay.
Mm.
That is a very misunderstood important part of SEO. I'm not sure how much you know about entities and how important they are for SEO. Basically, what you're mentioning, it's like two entities, the host and guest are
Hmm.
talking to each other. Do you want to share a little bit more
Sure.
information about your understanding of entity and how important that is in search?
Yeah, yeah. So in the context of what we were talking about for a podcast, the entities that I'm talking about are essentially the roles that the two people are playing within the playing field, which is the podcast studio. You have, like you mentioned, the host and you have the guest. Now, if only one of those two is a subject expert, just by you as two separate entities being in the same arena, what we call in SEO, we call it link juice. If your website is being linked from a high authority website, if they're linking to you, you essentially get that association with a higher authority website. And therefore, Google sees that as one of many components in SEO, but Google sees that linking as a trust signal, as an authority signal. So the entities that I'm talking about here with the host and the guest is, even if you're not the content expert, if you're in the room with someone who is, then that passes authority signal onto the person who is not the content expert. They're whoever has the higher authority, the one with the lower authority gets pulled up a little bit, but it's not necessarily the case where the one who has higher authority gets dragged down if the one with less authority is in the same room with them. So just by being in the same space and having two separate thought leaders or experts, you can pass each other authority and algorithms pick up on that.
Absolutely. So luckily I rank number one in Google for the search term AI SEO expert. So I'm on a lot of podcasts. I love being interviewed, but also interviewing. So if you do a search for my name, just my name, Chris Raulf, you actually on page one, you should see a lot of podcast interviews with me. I ended up on this really high quality podcast session. And man, I immediately saw a boost in rankings related to my personal website and to my, entity, the Chris Ralph. So
Mm.
very well said. Yeah. So I guess the
Yeah.
first key takeaway here, if you have a chance, if you're listening to this podcast, if you have a chance to be interviewed by somebody who has authority, take that opportunity. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a great way because, let's take it outside of SEO for a little bit. I was talking with a friend who had exited his business just a couple months ago in December, and he's starting a new business that helps founder-led brands create their brand story, right? And he told me, he's like, Austin, nobody buys coaching. What they buy is a deliverable. They buy assets. So if I were to sell a coaching package and say it's $15,000, that's a really hard sell. So what he did with his new venture is he is essentially putting it's a storytelling brand where he is interviewing these founders, a series of different kinds of interviews with different people on his team who are experts in different parts of the storytelling and social media framework, but he's not selling the interview, he's selling the 5 hours worth of edited video content on the other side of that. So in the process of he and his team interviewing people, they are coaching them in the meantime. They're coaching them through the process. They're helping them shape the way that they think and the way that they speak so that the outcome is actually of higher quality. And I'm saying all this because a podcast is, if we weren't recording this, it would be valuable only to you and me.
Yeah.
But it's valuable in two other ways. It's valuable to the people who are listening right now, but it's also valuable of a conversation for both Chris and Austin as entities outside of this recording, because we can both point to this conversation and say, we created an asset. We created something that we can point to. I think that's a benefit that maybe a lot of people don't realize is not only the conversation, but it's the asset that it creates.
Good point. So my business partner has been pushing me to do podcasting for a long time. And like, oh my God, I'm so busy. It's not valuable. Man, I wish I would have started sooner. Let's actually talk about that, right? So a lot of our audience are local service businesses or small agencies. They start a podcast and immediately think they need a studio, expensive equipment, production team. What does it actually take to get started in a way that creates content good enough for AI search to pick up? Or more broader, what does it take to get started? How did you get into hosting people like me on your podcast?
Yeah, I love this because I think we don't realize how much we know until we're put in an arena to test our knowledge. And the way that I started in this is years ago, I would host in-person events, but I wouldn't host them as the keynote speaker. I would host them as a facilitator. So although, yes, my name was on the marketing, it was on the flyers that I would hand out. When people got there, I would basically welcome everybody, and then I would bring other experts up to stage, and then I would go. So what I'm saying is I started where I didn't have to be like the center of attention. I didn't have to be the star of the show. So for those who are not starting a podcast yet, just realize that the reason you're probably not starting it yet is because you think you have to have all the answers and you think you have to be the star of the show. But the essence of bringing somebody on and having somebody else as a thought leader is you get to highlight their experience. And that's the mindset that I go into whenever I'm hosting podcasts now. Is I know I get to talk with global leaders. Like I get to talk with global, people who are making waves in marketing and AI. And I know that I don't have to be the star of the show. And so my job is really to be as interested in the guest as I can. And I find when you take that pressure off of yourself and you say, my job is to make the other person look good. First of all, don't put pressure on yourself in that regard, because it's really easy to overthink this stuff. But just realize that it's a collaboration. So you don't need a fancy microphone, although I have one. You don't need a fancy camera. I didn't have this camera until last week. Chris, when I interviewed you, I didn't even have a fancy camera. I guess the thing I'll say before we move on is, if you're the type of person, I'm kind of this type of person where I have to feel like I can step into playing a role, almost like an alter ego, before I actually become that person just naturally. So if what it takes for you is to close your blinds and get like I have like a $15 ring light that I bought from Amazon. Like if that's what it takes, and set up your phone and figure out the continuity camera on the iPhone. This iPhone is like a really good camera. This microphone is probably $25. And this was my original podcast studio here.
We got the same equipment. Well, I got a Pixel. So when I go to conferences, we're recording this on Riverside, I love technology, right? I whip up the app and then, hook us up and boom, you're podcasting. So easy. Anybody needs to do it. And we're actually now trying to implement this for our clients because it's going to help us help them. It creates net new content that has never been created before. I mean, I can guarantee you I'm going to upload the knowledge, the information that we're discussing here today into virtual Chris, so that thing is getting even better. And by the way, since we last spoke, and you can Google it, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
I used, that methodology to get a piece of content to rank within less than 24 hours at the top in Google using sort of like the podcasting
Yeah.
technique. I just interviewed myself
Uh-huh.
in conjunction with virtual Chris. It's shocking. Yeah, it's
Holy smokes.
yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So we created, I started about a year ago, create a virtual copy of me. My wife absolutely hates it because I talk more to that thing than I talk to her.
Uh-huh.
I just saw a text from her. I'm going to have to ignore her, and then she's going to yell at me for not getting back to her. But so we created this virtual Chris that where I upload, I do a lot of podcasts, like speaking
Mm-hmm.
at conferences, calls, this and that. Like everything goes into the knowledge base. It's very well organized, structured in a way that it's easy retrievable. It has a set of instructions that it knows exactly what it is, right? And then with Claude, it builds memory.
Mm.
So when I go for a walk now, so I use this thing and I put in an earplug, right? And I have a set of questions. Like I think about an article that I want to create. Now, I give you the example.
Mm.
So if you do a search for Kilimanjaro, Serengeti Safari, Zanzibar guide, that's what we did, my wife and I.
Mm.
You're going to find it's a piece that I put up on LinkedIn, right? I
Mm.
basically just had Claude came up with the questions and then I answered them. Like, I'm asking you questions right now. So I just walked out there. People probably thought I was crazy. So it just recorded my questions. And
Uh-huh.
then I ran it through Claude, obviously, with a very sophisticated set of prompting.
Mm.
It created a fully AI generated piece of content. And yeah, if anybody listening to this, just do that search Kilimanjaro, Serengeti Safari, Zanzibar guide. You should
Mm.
find that piece that I created on LinkedIn at the very
Mm.
top. So it's a very similar technique, right?
Mm.
That we're doing right now. I have questions for you. You're answering them. That's what I'm testing when I go for walks out there.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love it. But I think the thing for me, which I haven't tested that specific methodology out, but I
Yeah.
have been asking AI, ChatGPT, like, how can I bring out more of my thought leadership? Like, I'm several years behind you in terms of my professional career. Absolutely in AI and SEO, I'm far behind you, Chris. But I want to bring out my knowledge that I gained through interviewing, almost 100 agency owners and global agency leaders, essentially. And that sort of a methodology, if the audience is listening, if you're not ready for a podcast guest, like find all the data that you can, throw it into a GPT, and then turn on voice mode and say, like, hey, act
Yeah.
as this person and I will interview you and basically see if you can hang. Like, see if you can keep up.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
So there's many ways to get this started. Obviously, interviewing a real person is like the ultimate thing to do, but
Definitely.
there's other ways to get started. And even me, like walking out there, talking to myself, I do what it takes.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about distribution for a second here. So we tell every client now, if you're doing a podcast, it has to be on YouTube for
Mm.
reasons that we talked about earlier, not just the audio platforms.
Mm.
YouTube, second biggest search engine in the world, right? Because
Hmm.
that's where the AI citation engine is pulling from. What's your approach to making sure podcast content actually gets discovered? Where do you guys at Digital Web Solutions, where do you put out the content there?
Yeah. So there's two sides to this. I'm very blessed that DWS has a big team. We have a great production team that works behind the scenes, and after every podcast, they have like they're pulling together the editing, they are making clips for social media. So I'm very grateful that they do a lot of the heavy lifting. Something that I do, which is really cool, is first of all, I listen to a lot of different podcasts. I listen to a lot of popular ones. Some of them I'm sure you'd recognize. Diary of a CEO is probably the biggest and most popular one that I've listen to on a regular basis. I'll bring in this next point later because it's part of the, I guess, technical like production of it. But in terms of distribution, the thing that LLMs and algorithms are pulling from is not the audio waves. I think it seems obvious to me, but let me just state it more simply. Like, it's looking at text. So the transcript is actually one of the most important parts of the podcast. So yes, you can have distribution of the video on YouTube. Like, the reason that YouTube videos are cited in Google is because Google is able to read the transcript of it. It's not like listening to our voices and tonalities, although, that is
Yeah.
a part of it, but that's way in the future. So the transcript can be reused. It can be used to train GPTs. I am using it to create LinkedIn posts. I'm using it now. I have a new client with Willman Ventures, which is my own company, where I'm essentially interviewing her for podcasts, and I'm using the transcript to help her write a newsletter. Again, to write LinkedIn posts. She has a large audience on X, but she's not very active there anymore. She was like 3 years ago. So just thinking outside of the box of like, oh, we're not just limited to the audio video, but the actual text transcript can go through the virtual Chris. I have a virtual Austin. That content from one episode can be added to a database, and you can have something like Claude look across and see patterns, and then those patterns can be reused and mixed and matched with other podcasts to then create more unique net new content that was not even available from you, from your guest, from your interaction, but now it's net new content available from all the interactions pulled out together. So there's a couple different ways, I guess, to do it. But like I said, I have a team that does the heavy lifting, and they're posting every single day on LinkedIn account for eCoffee with Experts, as well as the Instagram account for eCoffee with Experts.
Nice. So what you said is exactly what we built with, it's called BSM Copilot. So we try to get source content, net new content to the form of podcasting or interviewing clients, or them, finding YouTube videos, stuff where they spoke at conferences. And that's exactly what we do. We use that, basically the transcripts, feed it into their virtual company brain. We set that up for our clients. And then, man, it's magical what you can do with AI, because then it's totally fine to use AI to generate content, because guess what? Yeah, it's AI generated content, but it feeds on net new real content by a real person, right? It's working. And when we spoke, I showed you a bunch of examples, right?
Yeah, I fact checked you.
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah.
So again, this is not rocket science, and I'm still shocked by how few people actually take advantage of podcasting. Like today, we spoke with a company. They do excavating, sewer line repair, etc., etc. Man, what a cool topic to do a podcast about, right?
Right.
Where like he could even, when he's on the job, talk to a customer. Why not do like a 5-minute podcast, right? This is kind
Yeah.
of stuff that will get you up in the rankings and cited in AI overviews. All right.
Yeah.
Onward. Let's get into the craft. So you've done a lot of interviews on the Coffee with Experts podcast. When you think about what makes a great interview, not just an okay one, but one that people will actually remember. Hopefully people will remember this one and share. What comes to mind? What are some easy, low-hanging fruit tips that you can pass on to our audience?
I love this question because there's a couple different angles that I take. One is I try and think, so even if you think of your own network outside of marketing, which, yeah, I have obviously my own network outside of marketing, but a lot of my friends and connections on LinkedIn are business owners, or they're in SEO, or they're in marketing, and that's who I talk to. So when I interview someone, I often think, which of my friends would be excited that I'm talking to the guest right now? And then I try and think from their brain through my lens. So I'm usually thinking of like maybe 1, 2, or 3 people who I can essentially represent on the podcast and ask their questions that I know that they're struggling with. I can ask those questions to the expert because I know it's going to help at least one person in the audience. And likely, if they're struggling with that, my friend, if they're struggling with that, probably other people are struggling with that, even if I'm not. So I think that's a great way, because if you then share it with your friend, imagine how many other people will hear that and think, oh, I have a friend who's dealing with that same issue. I think it can be limiting from the perspective of a host if I am selfish, essentially just thinking of myself, because a lot of the times I won't have the same challenges that many of my audience has. So that, being the representative of your close friends and of your network on the podcast, I think is a great concept to keep in mind. The other one that I think of is, and I've just started to implement this recently, is how can I ask the most pertinent question at the front? I used to kind of build up to questions throughout
Oh,
the
yeah.
interview, warm people up. But there's a podcast I listen to. It's called Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson, another big one. And I notice he starts his podcast without any intro, and he just asks a very simple, like, most important question of the guest, the first thing. And that just hooks me right away, and I find myself listening the whole time. Those things. And then I guess the other thing of like how to have a great interview is to feel the energy and just be yourself. Like, podcasting is one of those weird art forms where it's kind of like a 60 Minutes, CNN perceived interview where they're buttoned up and they're talking with like Donald Trump and everything is very straight laced. It's kind of between that and like having a beer at a bar. It's somewhere in between. So just like feeling into my own energy. I tend to be a very happy person. I smile a lot. And what I've noticed is when I bring guests on, if I can get them to laugh early in the
Yeah.
conversation or get them to reflect my smile early in the conversation, that defense barrier goes down and they're more likely to share and be comfortable sharing things that they may never have shared before on other podcasts, just because they felt like they had to keep their cards close to their chest. So if I can, I don't want to, like, I don't need to be somebody's friend and, you hear all that like building rapport. I think the key is just to, whatever your natural tendencies are when you're in social environments with people who love you, allow those to come out and allow the other person to feel that you're a person too and feel like it's okay to be imperfect. Absolutely
Yeah.
key. Yeah.
Yeah, I could tell when you had me on your podcast, you were actually like stretching, like getting ready. Like,
Yeah.
last night I played soccer, so I was warming up and didn't pull anything. So I think that's a good routine. What does your routine look like? I think, it's also a mental thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're having a conversation. We're hoping that people, this resonates with them, that people get something out of it.
Yeah.
We're putting on a show, like
Mm.
you need to perform. Like last night, sadly we lost, but it was a fun game. So I prepped for it. What does your prep, very briefly, what does that look like?
Yeah. I guess, like, if we're talking about the habit right before, like Tony Robbins has
Yeah.
his trampoline. I don't have a trampoline or anything, but what I notice really helps me is if I have a chance to do box breathing. If you've ever heard of box breathing, you said you do yoga. This is like a separate thing. Quickly for the audience, box breathing is essentially you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, or however many counts you want to do, but 4 of those in, 4 of those held at the top, 4 counts exhaling, and then 4 counts holding your breath while everything is exhaled. And then I try and do, if I have time, I'll do 10 cycles of those. And what I noticed, Chris, is like it can be very nerve-wracking to try and cram my prep if I have like, 5 pages of prep or 6 or 8 like you sent me. It can be very difficult right before the interview to try and cram all of that in. So what I found is my routine is not to feel the most prepared just minutes before the interview, but it's to feel the most relaxed. That's where I feel the best.
I did a podcast with the CEO of Duda. It's a content management, web development
Mm.
platform. Incidentally, right across the bridge in Louisville, Colorado. A big company, super smart guy, Itai Sedan. I prep. You got the questions, right? I've heard a lot of questions. I'm Swiss. I'm very organized, stick to the plan. So I consult my questions, right? And I'm like, ask him a question, and man, I'm fascinating. The guy is talking like really intelligently, like it makes sense, right? So oftentimes when you ask somebody a question, people will often answer things that you're about to ask. He answered a question in depth, and then I asked him a question, and he just looked at me. I was like, "You idiot! I just answered that."
Yeah.
So how
Yep.
do you deal? How do you obviously don't want it to be scripted, and it's dangerous, right? To have just a script. We're gonna do 5 questions. How do you make sure it's a good flow? And I think we're gonna include the link to that podcast below in our podcast so that people
Nice.
can see that. How do you deal with that? How do you make sure it's a natural flow to avoid these kind of weird moments that I was in?
Man, you're bringing up something that I've noticed too. When I interview really, really smart people or who are just like, they're on another level,
Yeah.
I've experienced the same thing. I'll ask one question and then they answer my next 4 in their first response. I'm like, oh crap. We're like 3 minutes into the interview and I'm like 50% of the way done with my questions. So I think, like you mentioned, it does come down to prep. But here's a hack, I guess, that I've found that strays from that preparation off the page. I would expect as being a host of a podcast that I would understand who the guest is. I would expect myself to know what their background is, what they're interested in, what they're curious about right now. But what I found is I signed up for several different newsletters. One's like a LinkedIn newsletter, one is like an economic newsletter, one is a sales newsletter. So I'm reading like earlier in the day, and I'm reading a biology book right now of all things.
All
And what I
right.
find is if I I'll tell you about it later, but if I have other interesting thought leadership perspectives that are somewhat adjacent, they don't all have to be around marketing, but I find if I can reference things that are happening in the world in adjacent industries, that's how I can kind of avoid those awkward silences where I run out of questions on the page, because typically the page is going to be the obvious questions. It's going to be what everybody asks. But if I'm interviewing you and I say, Chris, I don't have this as a question on the page, but I'm curious what you think about the legislation in the EU where they have been pushing against the development of AI. Like, what do you think the moral and ethical and like economic implications are of a country that doesn't allow AI or is less than pro AI versus the US, which is, building gigafactories all
Yeah.
over? That's not on the page, but you know what? It's something that's pretty interesting. It's adjacent, but that's how I try and so like basically what I'm saying is something tactical is don't be afraid to be interested in what you're interested in, because that's what makes the podcast great.
Absolutely. And obviously, we weren't born amazing podcasters, and I'm still learning, but
Same.
I love it. It's actually, if I could only do this in sales, that would be it. Let's get a little bit more tactical. So you have
Sure.
somebody on your podcast, and obviously things can get edited out, but have you had people on your podcast where they give an answer and then they go on for the next 10 minutes explaining the answer?
Yes.
How do you deal with that? Like, how do you like rein it in, right? I like to talk, so luckily my team sometimes they're like, "We get it."
Cut. Way in the background.
Duh. Yeah.
Well, there's 3 different kinds of guests, I feel, maybe 4. I mean, there's a bajillion different kinds of guests, but the main categories that I see is there's the one that you just explained that you ask a question and they answer your next 4. They're like the hyper intelligent,
Yeah.
they know what they're doing, they do this all day long. On the opposite side of that, there is someone who it's their first time on a podcast and they were the very studious type in school, like the valedictorian, kind of study for everything. And I'll ask them a question and they will answer just the question. And they won't give any context or anything. And so their answers are very short. And I'm like trying to ask more of them, but they don't give it to me. Then you have someone who's kind of somewhere in the middle, which is like this person you just talked about, which is the one who answer, and then they explain their answer, and then they explain how they came to it. And with those people, so obviously you have to approach all these people differently, but I have, I'll tell you a quick story of where this perspective comes from. I have been a volunteer, or a crew is what they call it, at Tony Robbins events. And if you've
Oh,
never been to a Tony Robbins event, they are massive. They're like thousands of people, like 8 to 9,000 people in a huge hall. And the most expensive seats are right up front around the stage. And they're usually $10,000 to $15,000 per seat, but you can like basically reach up and touch Tony. And then there's like probably 100 of those, that to give you a scale of how big this is. And then there's like, let's say the front 50 rows or something. Those are like $1,000 a seat. And then you have the next 40 rows, which are like maybe $750. And then kind of the rows in the back, which are like maybe $300 to $500 per seat. So as my role on crew, I had to, the first day that the doors opened, everybody tries to rush up and get the front seats, even though they have like a silver or a gold, or a silver or a bronze badge. So what I'm getting at is, on day one of the 4-day conference, as the concierge, or the person who helps people find their seats, if you are rude and like not push, but stop people, pull them out of their section if they don't belong there, if you're like serious on day one, day two is way easier. Even after break on day one, it's way easier. People will listen to you because they know that you mean business. So I find it's the
yeah.
same thing in a podcast, like with a guest. If I have a guest who's just like going on and on and on, and I notice it after the first question, I will jump in and I can start to insert myself by going, yeah, well, and you basically have to talk over sometimes. But if you do that early on, you basically teach them from a very early place that there's, it's a dynamic, it's a back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, I find it so interesting, right? You probably have never spoken with that person before. Certainly when we did our podcast, the first
Yeah.
one, you never met me, right?
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah.
it's very interesting talking to different people and learning, what kind of communicator they are. And I think, kudos, you did an incredible job. You're a natural. So we're, by the way, already way over. Usually I try to limit these to like 30 minutes.
Oh, cool.
But let's keep on going for a little bit longer.
Heck
Hopefully
yeah.
people find value in this. Like
Yeah, I hope so.
how long are your podcasts? Is there a set limit, or do you just play it by ear?
Here's my strategy that I've learned when I first started podcasting with eCopy with Experts. I said, we're shooting for 30 minutes of content today. But as I've progressed, I have gotten both of those aspects, where some people I really want to talk to and want to keep them going, and some people I can't stand. So now, instead of saying we're aiming for 30 minutes of content, I say typically these last between 15 and 45 minutes.
Yeah, oh my God.
Just give them a huge range, and and be like, you know what? Sometimes we'll end early, sometimes we'll go a little bit later. Either is fine. So that's how I frame it. And I think, going back to business development, to sales, everything is about framing and presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you end an interview? And I know we're gonna get there at some point, but how do you try to end when do you know it's the time to end it?
Yeah. There was I forget who said it, but they said, always try and leave a party when it's at its peak.
Yeah.
So I try and think of that. And when I notice that a guest is like, man, we are really jamming, I don't end it right there, but I'll signal by saying, man, you have so many good things to say. As we kind of wrap up the conversation here, what are your thoughts on blah, blah, blah? And I'll say, as we wrap up, or as we kind of come to a close, or something to signal that, like, hey, we're not going to talk for another 40 minutes, but also this is not the last question. Something like that. Again, with framing.
Awesome. As we talk about that, why don't we do one more question? So our audience, local service businesses, hopefully they listened to this up to now. They're still like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. I don't have time. Like, what would be, you own your own business, right? You do this, somebody can hire you for podcasting. Is that correct?
So I work with digital web solutions for the podcast, but I
Yep.
also have Willman Ventures, which helps people do things like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would
Specifically
you,
founders. Yeah.
yeah, somebody comes to you, like they're like, hey, I think I want to do it, but I'm not convinced. What's your sales pitch? How do you get somebody to do this?
Uh, Basically, if somebody says that getting all the 25 years of experience that's trapped in your head out into the world in a way that your ideal client profile resonates with it, I would say if that's not the most important thing, what is? Like people like especially for founders, our marketing is completely commoditized now. Yes, you
Yeah.
can show results. Yes, you can Google AI SEO expert and see Chris Raulf is number one. But also other small business owners may not be AI SEO expert. Reason being is because they have all that information trapped in their head and they're not as good as Chris at making it prolific and coming out and creating that content every day. So I would basically say, listen, if you want to be like Chris, if you want to show up exactly where your ideal client profile is searching for you, yes, you can create your own like kind of blog content, but guess what? A majority, like your business foundation comes from your foundations. And so if you can't get that out into the world in a way that resonates with both the algorithms and the humans, you're going to be plateaued. You're going to be stuck. So, like most of the agency founders who are trapped below 3 million will tell me that their leads come from referrals, word of mouth, networking, which all come from your voice, from their voice
Yeah.
specifically. So this is just a way to amplify the voice and put it in Dolce and Gabbana. Like that's why you would hire someone like me.
I'm gonna sort of end it with a comment or thought. I'm also teaching part of a master's degree for a university in Europe, online degree. A lot of Americans in that class. It's way cheaper than education here. 5 kids, believe me. I'm living
What?
paycheck to paycheck. Yeah, and first grandchild. So
Yeah.
we're already setting up college funds. My students, as part of the assignment, I'm teaching them how to use AI to create content the right way. Guess what they have to do? They have to interview one of their classmates about a topic that they're super excited about.
Mm,
So basically, I'm making them do a podcast,
yeah.
record the transcript and use the prompting sequence, and boom, you get a piece of content. So I'm teaching, those are adults, professionals. Some of them are actually as old as I am or even older. What I find is that when I told them that this is the assignment, they have to talk to somebody, sort of record a transcript, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them like super excited. Some of them, oh yeah, try to do it. Some of them are like, oh, I don't know if I have somebody else to talk to.
Mm,
I don't, it's really, I can see how this is not necessarily easy for everybody to do because not everybody is like us, right? Apparently we like to talk. Last tip, how do you overcome that? If is that just in your head where you're going to make that switch? Like,
mm.
how do you get somebody over the edge?
Think about this. When you were, well, where did you go to? Yeah, you went to college, right? Where did you go to university?
Switzerland. I got
In
like
Switzerland.
a mouth.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit different culture probably than the US. So let's back it up even into like high school or even junior high, right? Is it easier for you as an individual to see a cute girl at the school dance or at a track meet? Is it easier for you to go up to that individual and say, "Hey, I think you're really cute. I want to know more about you." Da da da. Typically, that one-on-one is really hard to do, because it puts all the pressure on you. But going back to kind of one of those first tips of like understanding who else in your network would want to know the information from that person, now it's like you are wingmanning and you have your buddy who thinks the girl is cute. You'll go up to her all day and be like, "Hey, my buddy thinks you're really cute. He wants to know more about you." So that's how I think, like, if you're stressed out about having a one on one conversation, just think of, you're wingmanning for somebody else. You're wingmanning the audience. And in that way, kind of puts a mental protective barrier against you. And you can ask all the questions that you want as long as obviously they're well intentioned, but you can ask all the questions that you want because they're not technically coming from you in your mind. They're coming from your buddy, the wingman that you're trying to help succeed. You want to see them happy, and you're being your wingman to your audience. So that was the advice that I would give.
Awesome. If there's a cute girl, if the will is there, you can make it happen. Awesome. I got a few rapid fire questions for you to wrap this up.
Cool.
Audio only or video podcast?
Ooh, most of ours are listened to on audio only, but video for YouTube. Has to be video for YouTube.
Awesome. Solo episodes or guest interviews?
Guest all the way.
Perfect. Scripted or wing it?
A mix of both, but I would say probably scripted, to be honest. Not scripted, but you got to have some prep. You got to have a framework.
Awesome. Riverside or Zoom or another platform?
Riverside, for sure.
Nice. We're not getting paid by Riverside, by the way.
But we should be.
Yeah. 1 60-minute episode like we're doing here, or 3 20-minute episodes?
With the same person?
Yes.
Oh, with the same person. 1 60-minute episode.
Nice. Wine or beer?
Ooh, beer, but it depends. I don't really drink that much, but beer.
Beach or mountain?
Mountains.
Awesome. Hey, you should visit me here in Boulder.
I'm seeing you in Boulder, man. Let's go. We're gonna have a great time.
My God. Yeah, eventually we'll have to meet in person. Where are you located?
Phoenix. Just short flight.
That's right. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll eventually make it happen. Maybe we'll do an in-person. The next one we'll do an in-person. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it would be so cool. I've been looking to do that here in Phoenix because there's a huge entrepreneur community, digital marketing community in Phoenix, and I just haven't pulled it together. Yeah.
Let's keep in touch. But man, that was awesome. Austin, this was as expected. A great conversation. I do hope that, people are still listening. They got something out of it. I actually incidentally listened to a similar kind of podcast that came up right in my stream. And I'm so glad I was able to have that conversation with you. I think it's valuable information because what we discussed today makes a massive difference in somebody's digital marketing strategy. So yeah, Austin, that was awesome. If anybody wants to know more about digital web solutions, where can they find you?
LinkedIn. I'm getting more and more, I'm putting out more and more thought leadership content, largely due to the conversations that I have on the podcast. So it is Austin Willman. So not Williams, Willman. And digitalwebsolutions.com. You can, reach out to us there. And if you want to know more about like my side projects, it's willman.ventures/home. You can find out more about our founder stuff
Links
there.
Are right below.
Oh yeah. Let's go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's do this again sometime in the future. As always, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's Friday SEO tip. A little bit longer than expected, but I think good content. As always, stay safe and healthy, and we'll catch you in the next Friday SEO tip. My name is Chris Raulf. I'm the founder of Boulder SEO Marketing and Chris Raulf AI SEO. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.